We're so excited to have two of our fabulous community-based lawyers. And I say community-based because they're both champions of the community clinic system and leaders within community legal system, and they both pay great attention to issues of migration, immigration, international students, migrant workers, refugees, refugee claimants, women, gender issues, certainly race and anti-racism. Both Avvy and Shalini are also founding members of Color Poverty, Color of Change, a coalition here in Ontario that was co-founded by OCASI and our clinic partners, along with a couple of our academic partners, particularly from Ryerson University. We are recording the session. I'm not sure if it's recording yet, but let me remind my colleagues that we will record the session. At the end, we will upload it to our YouTube channel. I believe we will send the link to everyone who has registered for this session. I don't see that. Yes, all registered participants will receive the link by email after it has been posted to our YouTube channel. We will begin with a presentation from Shalini and Avvy. So brief introductions. Avvy, go, and I'm not sure in which order you're speaking, so I'll just introduce you the way you show up. I believe Shalini is starting. Shalini Konanur is the executive director and a lawyer at the South Asian Legal Clinic of Ontario, SALCO, and a steering committee member of Color Poverty, Color of Change. And Avvy Go is the clinic director of the Chinese and Southeast Asian Legal Clinic and a founding steering committee member of Color Poverty, Color of Change. They're both known for their work in advocating, as I said, in the immigrant and refugee serving sector, in the women's sector, and certainly around issues of race and anti-racism and economic justice. Welcome, Shalini. Are you up?
I'm up, yes.
Take it away.
Thank you, Debbie, for the introduction and the kind words, and thank you to all of you for giving us some time this afternoon. So Avvy and I are going to take you through very briefly the streams that have been introduced, these 3 new streams for permanent residents, and talk about the eligibility criteria, talk about the caps, and then we'd like to spend some time answering some of the common questions that have come up for people and discussing the gaps and the advocacy that we need to do to expand these programs to support many of the clients we work with. And as a disclaimer, always these types of presentations are not standalone documents. They're meant to just enhance what we say orally. And of course, they are not legal advice. But certainly we encourage you to reach out to legal clinics and other resources from Legal Aid and other legal services if you need that legal advice. Okay, so I kind of talked you through what the agenda is going to be today. What we know is that around April 14, 2021, the Government of Canada announced 3 new pathways for permanent residents. And I think many of you know that right now those pathways are capped at 90,000 essential workers and international students. The process of applying opened on May 6, 2021. And what they're telling us now is that it will remain open either until November 5th, 2021, and we'll get to later whether that's actually the case or not, or until the cap limits have been met. So in reality, what we are looking at is 6 streams. So it's 3 categories, and then those categories are shifted between English and French speaking. So 6 streams in total. So there is a pathway for temporary workers in healthcare, 1 for temporary workers in other eligible occupations, and 1 for international students. And what you can see from the slide is the interesting piece. On the English stream of all 3, there are caps. On the French or bilingual stream, there are no caps. So that's something to keep in mind, right? And the eligibility requirements for each program are the same between the English and French stream, except of course for the language skills. So I'll take you through a little bit of what the eligibility requirements look like. So the healthcare stream is the one that is open to temporary workers in healthcare. And the general eligibility requirements have to be met by anybody who's applying. You have to have 1 year of Canadian work experience in an eligible occupation. Sorry. And that's 1 out of a 3-year period. So if I were to apply today, They would look back for the preceding 3 years and they would figure out whether I had 1,560 hours of eligible work experience. And they define work. Work is any activity for which wages are paid or commission is earned. And the experience, as I mentioned, has to have been gained in the 3 years preceding the application. You have to be employed in Canada in any of the eligible healthcare occupations at the time the application is received. So again, the key here is you have to be employed at the time you are applying. You also have to attain a level of proficiency of at least benchmark 4 in language testing. And we're going to talk later on about how these things really create barriers for a lot of the clients we work with. The other piece is when you are applying.
Excuse me, everybody mute themselves, please.
Thank you. When you are applying, you have to have valid temporary resident status and you must physically be present in Canada. So really, when I heard those announcements initially, I was feeling a little hopeful, but when you start breaking down all of the eligibility things that need to be in place, it becomes more and more difficult, right? In the English stream, you must also show that you are intending to live in any province other than Quebec, because they have a different focus for French-speaking stream. And you cannot be a refugee claimant or self-employed. So these are the general requirements for the healthcare stream. As mentioned, the cap for the healthcare stream in the English-speaking side is 20,000 applications. And I have not listed all of the types of jobs that are eligible. I've listed some. But what you need to do is you can go on to the IRCC website and it actually has the much more expansive list of what the healthcare occupations are. So it does include registered nurses, nurses aid, family physicians, dentists, pharmacists, dietitians, physiotherapists, and much, much more. So when people call, the first thing they ask is my job eligible? The way to figure it out is actually to look at the full list, which is the National Occupation Classification list. Look at what IRCC has said the healthcare occupations included are. And in addition to that, the NOC list for each of these occupations gives you a description. And why I say that's important is because sometimes a client might be a nurse's aide, but at their workplace, they're not called nurse's aide. What we will say is the NOC definition, the description of the job matches what they do. So we are going to call them a nurse's aide. It doesn't matter what the employer calls them. That's the job definition. So when we're trying to figure out whether someone's eligible, it's not as easy as just looking for the category. You're also digging into what are the job requirements for that category. So for temporary workers and other eligible occupations, so in the English stream, if you're not a healthcare worker, there are also a number of other eligible occupations that are eligible for permanent residence. The same requirements that I just went through for the healthcare slide, the general requirements, are the same for this category as well. So the work experience, the being employed, the valid temporary residence status, intending to live elsewhere, instead not Quebec, cannot be a refugee claimant or self-employed, and the language requirements. Again, the same. The groups of people that are eligible are what is different, and the cap is different. The cap for this stream, the English stream of other eligible occupations, is 30,000 applications, and there are a large number of groups who are eligible to apply. And we've listed again some of them here, not all of them. And you will have to go onto the IRCC website to actually look at the extensive list of positions that can be eligible in the other eligible occupations category. But you can see some of the ones here, and I have had clients contact me who've worked as cashiers, who've worked as in stores, who've worked as clerks. So we are looking at if they meet all of the other criteria, can they apply under this stream? Okay, so the other one of interest, particularly at SALCO, has been the international graduate stream. There are thousands of international students from South Asian countries in Ontario and across Canada. And of course, there are thousands of other students not from South Asian countries who are here studying. So the eligibility criteria for this stream is that you have to live outside of Quebec. You have to be physically present in Canada. You have to have valid immigration status in Canada. You have to reach a level 5 benchmark with your English. You have to be employed at the time of making the decision in any work that exists on the NOC list. So unlike the health and the other essential workers, which have specific types of jobs, here you just have to be employed in one of the NOC categories. You cannot be self-employed, and you have to have valid authorization to work. You also have to be a recent graduate from a designated learning institute. And when I looked into that deeper, what it says clearly from IRCC is that they will only accept applications from people who've graduated from September 2017 onwards. So if you have someone who's come to you who's graduated before September 2017, they are not going to be eligible. And again, you cannot be a refugee claimant. Now comes the slide on the types of jobs that they're looking for. So there are additional qualifications. So it's January 1st, 2017, not September. My apologies. So you have to have graduated by January 1st, 2017. You have to have a degree that is at least 8 months long, like an associate bachelor or master's doctorate. Or you can have a diploma in an eligible trade or a diploma in vocational studies. So slide 1 talks about a whole bunch of eligibility criteria related to the application. And in addition, slide 2 is telling you about the type of education you must have had and graduated from to be eligible. So that's the added layer for international students. You have to meet all of those initial criteria on working and being in Canada. You also have to have had a certain type of degree. And so you have to do an analysis then of what did this person graduate with? When did they graduate from that? Are they working now? What job are they working in? Is it on the NOC list? Do they have status? So it's a lot of hoops to jump through. So I want to talk really quickly before I turn it over to Avvy about the caps. And these are updated now from May 11th, and they're a little bit higher than that now. I want to highlight for you that the international graduate stream is now capped out. So while I've given you information on how to apply, the reality is they're not taking any more applications on that stream. And we're going to talk about caps and advocacy and what we want to see happen in a sec. The temporary healthcare workers stream is slightly higher now. I think today it was hovering around 1,400, and the temporary eligible occupations has also gone up to somewhere in the 8,000 to 9,000 range. But they are not anywhere near the caps that are in place yet on the English stream. And these are the caps on the English stream. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, but really quickly to say they're likely not anywhere near the caps because the eligibility requirements are actually very difficult to meet. So this grand announcement of this generous program to give a pathway to permanent residence, in reality, the numbers are showing us that many people can't meet that bullet after bullet after bullet piece that I showed you in the slides above on the eligibility. And so I think from people who work in these communities, there's a lot of advocacy that has to go on about revamping these programs. So just a really brief slide on the French and bilingual applicants. There are different requirements, obviously, for language. They're looking at level 4 and level 5 benchmarks, but in French, obviously. And these applications do not have caps. So we don't, I was not able to find how many applications have been put in under these 3 streams, but my understanding is that the uptake has been quite low, in fact, on the French-speaking side. So Avvy, maybe I'll turn it over to you to take over from here.
Okay, sure. And thank you, Shalini. When we were planning on this webinar, we are just going to say, okay, Shalini, you can just do all the talking. I'll just kind of nod and go along. Anyways, I think that as Charlotte has mentioned, like, the fact that there for some of the streams that, there are an underperforming of the number of application really speak to the fact that the streams and the criteria are made so restrictive that many of the people who come to our clinics or to your agencies for help would not qualify. Right. So like we know, as Shalini mentioned, all three streams require the applicant to have a valid immigration status. So right away, like we know that people who have, no status in Canada, like even if they have a valid work permit, but because work permit does not actually confer a status, right? So you actually need a temporary resident status, like a visitor visa to give you a status. So right away, a lot of the people to come to our clinic would not qualify. The fact that they would not allow refugee claimants to apply knocked out a lot of people who potentially could qualify. So the other concern is about the language requirement as well. That also disqualifies many people. So I remember reading in the Star, the Migrant Rights Network, they conducted a study of about 4,000 potential applicants, including international students, migrant workers, and they found out that more than 45% of the migrant workers and 34.5% of the international students who participated in the survey said they would not qualify for a variety of reasons. 25% of those said they did not meet the 12 months of work required in the designated occupations. About 13% are not currently employed. Another 13% do not have a valid work authorization after they lose their job during COVID, and they are not legally allowed to work elsewhere because they have a work permit that is tied to a particular employer. So all of these reasons make them ineligible. And one of the biggest hurdle, however, identified by that survey is actually the language requirement, because they have to meet the benchmark 4 in either of the official languages for either of the 4 language skill set areas. And so a lot of people said they simply don't have that accreditation right now. And some of them may be able to meet it, but they have to do the test. But of course, we know right away that during COVID time, many of these test centers, they have limited space. So we know that a lot of people who try to sign up for these tests are not able to get in. And they may get a space for sometimes in June or July. It depends on which streams that they apply to. Some of the streams are no longer, they no longer have space available. So even by June or July, let's say they have the test done, they may be locked out because they no longer have space to apply to. So all of these reasons make it very difficult for a lot of the potential applicants. So I think at some point, my guess is that the government will realize that they have the 90,000 applications there, but they will not be able to fulfill the 90,000 applicants kind of pool, right? And of course, some of these people, they might have submitted the applications now, but this is just the first step, right? So at some point, you also have to do the admissibility requirements, such as you have to pass a medical test, you have to pass the criminal test, you also have to pass security tests. So those people who might be able to submit the applications now may not be approved later on. So we may end up with a gap, right? So if like a number of people who apply may not be actually qualify at the end. So I think in terms of advocate, just thinking of advocacy kind of right away, I think there are two ways of kind of looking at it, right? So first of all, just like, when we have a Zoom a meeting, right? That 500 people may sign up, but only 200 people will actually show up. So I think maybe one way of approaching this is perhaps OCASI. I haven't read your letter in detail, so you may want to also say to the government that they should open up more space, just knowing that not every people who sign up will end up qualified, right? So that's one approach. The second approach is, of course, pushing the government to open the space by to make it available to more people. Even if we adopt the same criteria, I think there are a lot more people out there who would still qualify if they have more time to apply, that they will be able to meet these criteria. But ultimately, I think that it just, for speaking for our clinic, we need to make the criteria even more accessible to more people, right? So that people who don't have status now, people who may not meet the benchmark 4 requirement, I think more of those people should be allowed to apply. I know why the government is using this kind of system, because all of their internal studies show that people who have already been living in Canada, working in Canada, at least after they become permanent resident, for the first couple of years, they tend to do better than people who are immigrating from overseas. So I understand why they want to kind of find the potential applicants from within Canada. But I think an argument can be made that the ones who will succeed will be broader than what the criteria are suggesting now, right? So we have a lot of clients who have lived here for a long time. They may not have status, but they have been working anyways. They are providing essential service anyways. Then it's only fair that we give them a chance to apply as well. So I think all of those are kind of questions that we want to consider when we try to push for the advocacy piece.
Thanks so much, Avvy. I'm going to go through some of the common questions that came up when we were doing this presentation and tie them into your comments too. So a common question that comes up for us at SALCO is, can you apply by paper? The answer is no. You can only apply online. And when you really think about what does that do in and of itself as a barrier, you have to have internet access, you have to have data, you have to be able to make the application online. And that's been an issue for a number of clients that we've seen. I've given you a few of the resources, of course, of people who are thinking about these issues and doing that work, but I also encourage you to reach out to your potential local community legal clinic, or if you fall into the service mandates for CSALC and SALCO, to reach out to us for your low-income clients who need support on these applications. So a big one, and it ties to Avvy's comments around not being able to get the language testing done. Just yesterday, I had a client who had to actually cancel their language testing because they're coming from another part of the province and they couldn't secure an Airbnb to stay somewhere to be able to go for the testing the next morning, and they couldn't find transportation to get to the testing early enough if they tried to do it same day. So there are all these logistical complications around testing. But the reality is that if you put in your application and it is missing the documents that are required to show eligibility, it will be sent back and refused. So that's a hard line, and one that I think is patently unfair. Another piece is, how do you pay? So we've had a number of clients who don't have credit cards. You can only pay online, and as it stands, only through debit or credit cards. They are not accepting prepaid credit cards for payment. This is what IRCC told us in a lengthy conversation we had with them last week. Can you submit a prior medical test? What we have been told is you can include a previous medical exam in an application that's been done, so you don't have to get a new medical, but it will be up to the discretion of the immigration officer who looks at the file as to whether they want to accept that medical or request that you do a new one. Generally, in my other immigration files, we will send old medicals, but we take the view that they tend to expire within 12 months. So when the file comes up for review, our clients are usually asked to do a new medical. They did not have a firm date, like to say to us, we'll only accept medicals from Jan 1st, 2017 onwards. They didn't have that date. They said it was up to the discretion of IRCC. Avvy has talked about the language issues, and you know, I understand in one way why they set some language benchmarks, but in another way, I don't. Because if the larger purpose of these programs is to recognize that we have people in Canada who are doing essential work, and they're doing it regardless of the language they're able to speak, then why are we not landing them? And I'll go on my soapbox in a sec, but I just want to finish off the common questions. Right. So I have finished them off. So what I want to say, just sort of in continuance of what Avvy said, is for me, when I think about the caps for these programs, I don't understand them. I hear this messaging from IRCC that we are in desperate need of immigration. We need people to come into the country. We have people in the country. We have international students by the thousands paying 6 times the rate to go to school. We are benefiting from their money. We are benefiting from the work they do while studying, and we are benefiting from the work they do after they graduate. That program capped out like that. To me, it's ridiculous then that you are setting caps when you see the trends. IRCC, once it knows that there are that many people in Canada who actually meet the stringent international student eligibility requirements, and we hit the cap so immediately, they should be raising that cap, right? And there's a link there, right? For me, the populations that have been pushed into that international student stream are largely from racialized communities. So it's racialized populations who bear the brunt of not getting the PR. On the other streams around essential work, I speak, and I'm sure Avvy does, and I'm sure almost everyone on this call does, to people every day who are undocumented. They work and they provide the critical services that we need and that have kept us going during this pandemic. They're the ones in our local stores. They're the ones doing the deliveries. In my neighborhood, there are people getting deliveries from companies daily, boxes and boxes. The clients who call me are the ones delivering those boxes, and they're the ones who are not being allowed to apply. So at what point do we need to turn around and say to IRCC, if you want to call this a pathway to PR for essential workers, you need to really figure out who you're talking about. Who are those essential workers? I was flabbergasted reading a story, I think it was last week in the Star, of an essential healthcare worker who's being sent home to the Philippines, and a massive campaign that had to be mounted just so that person could stay to get a second vaccine shot, and then celebrating that immigration is going to allow them to stay until June 2nd. And the question for me is, why is this person having to go home? This person has been providing essential healthcare services for the entire pandemic here in Canada, and it is unbelievable. This person does not qualify for these pathways. Right? Avvy, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I read about that story too. And the backstory to that deportation was that he actually came to Canada some years ago as a living caregiver, And because he did not declare that he had a child in the Philippines, and so he was deemed inadmissible because of his quote unquote misrepresentation. I mean, we know that there are a lot of similar stories like that, particularly among living caregivers. So, I mean, the fact that he was, first of all, being taken, his PR was being taken away. And, you know, he would still have qualified if he had declared a child, right? Like it's so, the fact that his permanent status was taken away. And then for whatever reason, he was not allowed to stay on humanitarian compassionate ground. And then he had to be deported after providing essential work, while, you know, being sent home to a country where they don't have vaccines or they don't have effective vaccines. I mean, the whole system, in my view, is failing, not just this one person, but stories like that. And that example just typifies some of the issues that we're seeing at the clinics on a day-to-day basis. And it also points to another point that I made earlier. There will be situations like this. Somehow, somewhere in the person's background, make them ineligible for the pathway. And then at some point, we probably will have to be making sure that we advocate for those individuals as well. Like, you know, they would otherwise qualify, but for whatever reasons, something in the background make them ineligible. And we need to be sure that those cases will need to be resolved to their favor as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have a number of questions, so
The questions.
can we go to the questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, sorry. Our first question, and it's a clarification. You talked and you showed the NOC codes that accepted. I am sorry, I've lost it. The person was asking, sorry. Okay, so the person says that they read as part of the policy for essential workers that they needed 1 year experience in the specific listed NOC codes, but that they need to be currently employed, which is a separate criterion that they can be employed in any occupation that exists in any of the NOC codes. Is that correct?
That's how I have read it. Yes.
Okay. So that was a question from Kaylee McGregor. So Kaylee, Shalini is saying, yes, your reading, your interpretation is correct. Do you think that now that the government have seen, and Avvy, you're speaking to this, that how quickly the 90,000 international student cap was met, that they would extend it? I know that the minister have been making noise that he is open to increasing the cap. I haven't seen anything specific about that. Can either of you comment?
I think it's up to
Do you have
us.
a crystal ball?
Yeah, I know. I have a crystal ball here. It's up to us to make that happen, right? Like, you know, and if he has, yeah, I've seen that statement as well. He's open to it. Then make sure he does it, right? You know, it's up to us to kind of, you know, call him, email him, like, you know, sort of write to him. Try to push not only the extension of the time, not only increasing the cap, right, the size of the cap, but actually expanding the criteria so that more people could qualify.
Good. Is level 4 English required for all of the areas? Reading, writing, listening, comprehension? Yes. Fariba, that's a yes. What happens, again from Kaylee, what happens if educational credential assessments are on indefinite pause due to COVID delays in other countries who won't send your documents to West to get it assessed?
So that's the first common question. What if you don't have all your documents? We had a long conversation with IRCC last week, my office, and they were very clear. If you don't have all your documents when you submit, they will send it back. So that's another piece of advocacy around having some flexibility to waive the requirement for certain documents, given the understanding that the pandemic has created those barriers. But they are not doing that right now.
Actually, Shalini, can I ask you a question, clarification question? So they said they will send you back, and does send it back to you. Do they give you a chance to resubmit?
So what they said is they just don't accept it. So they send it back to you, and then you can resubmit if the cap hasn't been met once you get the documents, right? Okay. But it's a situation where it's as if they didn't receive it. So you're not in the queue.
Okay.
So for healthcare workers, the best option should be to apply through the healthcare workers PR pathway.
I mean, it really depends on whether you qualify, right? Because there are just so many circles that you have to check off. But they are not anywhere close to the cap. So it is a good option if you meet all the criteria.
Okay, so this is from Baljinder. I'm going to read it. So to count the hours for part-time and full-time work, how many maximum hours can they claim? So for example, if a student works 20 hours, can he claim all 20 hours towards the PR policy? And if an international graduate on PGWP, everybody knows what PGWP is? I don't.
Postgraduate work permit.
Postgraduate work permit is working one full-time job of 40 hours plus one part-time job with 15 hours. Can he claim hours from both jobs, which would be around 55 hours?
Want me to take that, Avvy? Or?
I don't know the answer. I would assume that you can count the hours that you actually work. And I think that the question is really proving that you have those hours, right? So like as long as you have proof that you actually work those hours, then I think you would be able to count
to claim all of the hours you work.
Yeah.
So they have to be work under the immigration and refugee
definition of work. Yeah.
And then the hours have to be work in one of the not categories, right? Yeah. So the 1,560 hours that you need to show in the 3 years preceding your application have to be work, have to be in the categories that qualify you.
Yeah. So I don't know if the question, because you're saying that can he count 20? So I'm not sure whether the question is suggesting that he hasn't worked 20, but he wants to count 20. I'm not sure exactly what the question is about.
So I think you're right. Count the hours that you work, that you can prove you worked.
Yeah.
And work under the definition of this policy. Bushra is asking, if the student is PFWP, what kind of job should he be doing in the particular field of study? I would assume so.
What is PF? Is that
postgraduate? I think that's probably the postgraduate. It's probably PGWP, probably. I don't know what PFWP is. I'm assuming it might be a typo.
Yeah, it is a typo.
Okay. So,
that question?
Yeah, Bushra, do you want to unmute? Just say ask your question out loud.
No, I got your point. You said like you assume that any kind of hours would be counted toward that, not only in his particular field of study, right?
No, the work hours don't have to be in your field of study.
Okay.
But they do have to be in a field that's eligible, like one of the NOC list eligible categories for whichever pathway you're applying to.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, so here's a long, very technical question. And the question is coming from Alos Abis. He says, is he correct, or are they correct in assuming that the minimum IELTS test results for streams A are from streams A and B? So reading, your pass mark must be 3.5, listening must be 4.5, speaking must be 4, writing must be 4. I don't know how the benchmarks work, and I'm not sure that either of you know either. Naomi, can we treat? Sorry, go
What the
ahead.
IRCC, I was just going to say that the IRCC website that lays it out actually says benchmark 4 for all 4 levels. So I don't think it's 3.5 for one of them.
So reading has to be 4.0 as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I can see. Yeah, Olena, Naomi, everybody's shaking their head.
Yeah. So I don't know if the question is saying if you have 3.1 in one and 4.5 in the other, you average out to be 4. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I. That's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
what.
it has to be 4. Yeah.
Hi, this is Alios. So because the website says that in order to get CLB level 4 overall, the reading can still be a minimum of 3.5. And this is the confusing part because in the home child care provider pilot program and the home support pilot program, they were allowing 4.5 in reading, but the CLB level is 5. So I'm wondering if so that's the confusing part about this, is that it says CLB level 4, but it doesn't say in each. I don't see the word each. And then if you check the website, I'll send the website right here, but if you check the website for language proficiencies, it's written there that reading can be 3.5. So I'm wondering what really is it's so confusing. I'll send the website and maybe you can interpret for me, yeah.
But what we were sent by IRCC, the language that we were sent says attained a level of proficiency of at least benchmark 4 in either official language for each of the 4 language skill areas. So I'm not sure if,
each. Okay.
Yeah, that's the wording in my presentation is actually the exact wording that IRCC gave to us when we double checked last week. So there might be actually inconsistency in the information that they're putting out. And that happens frequently. Like I'll have a client who calls the call center, and you guys have probably all experienced this, who's told one thing, and a client in the exact fact situation who's told something differently. So it's something that maybe I could take back and confirm for you, but the language that I was given is in each of the 4. It has to be 4.
And it has to be 4. Okay, continuing. Alios, did you want to continue with your questions?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So sorry, my next question is, so do the other forms apart from the generic application, because it said there's also inconsistencies. It says that you should print it, sign it, and then scan it. Or can they just upload it without, because not all migrant workers have a printer and a scanner. And so that's also confusing, because I know some of the migrant workers right now are just uploading it because they're just worried, So are you hearing something otherwise from IRCC, that they can just upload the forms without signing it by hand, or can an e-signature be accepted?
I actually don't know if an e-signature can be accepted. Avvy, do you know?
I have that same question, like even for our regular, regular cases right now, right? We wonder whether IRCC is accepting e-signature. I tend not to do it because there's nothing in the form or the current forms itself that would say that they will accept e-signature. So, but if so let's say, well, I mean, if we know that they if we take the position that the caps are not going to be met soon, then I think we should try to help people who don't have a scan or whatever to see if we can help with those kind of things, right? But if we know that the caps are going to be met soon, then maybe try the e-signature route, right? You know what I mean? It's like get it in first.
Yeah, so maybe, I think your first point in terms of that should be one of the areas where our organizations are helping out, or folks are supporting people to get that scanned, and so that it's not sent back, right? Yes. But this is certainly something, Amy, we can raise with the minister's office, is that there needs some clarification around e-signatures.
Yes,
actually, can I just pop in and tell you that I just looked quickly on the website, and it actually has a link to how to do e-signature for these applications.
Okay.
Oh, good. So see, we all learned something.
It says there's a page that says, how do I sign my online application? and it says this is how you do your electronic signature. Do not print the forms out and sign them.
Okay.
Oh, but isn't that for only the generic form IMM 008? Because they said,
It may just be for the generic form.
because I think from my understanding, it says do not print and sign IMM 008 because they need the barcode. But for the rest, they say print, sign, scan. It's just so much.
So I think, Debbie, you're absolutely right.
printers.
Yeah, we'll ask for a clarification to be posted. Naomi, did you have something to add? Naomi Alboy.
No, the only question I have actually is, can people submit their applications from other people's computers if they don't have the digital savvy to do it themselves, and they don't have access to a computer, and many people don't have access to a computer? How are they going to submit this if you can't do anything by paper? Are they accepting applications that are being submitted on people's behalf?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a yes.
Because if that's the case, then there are all kinds of ways to deal with it.
To support.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I know that there are some private bar lawyers doing this as well, like, and the clients don't have credit card. So I know at least one lawyer who was using her own credit card to pay for the fee for the client.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. So agencies who are supporting can also use their own credit cards to do that.
Yeah. And for
Okay.
sure, we do that for our clients when we help them submit forms.
Yeah. Alois, I know you have other questions, but I'm seeing other people's hand up. Rahila, is your hand up?
Yes, I have a quick question. When you will be reaching out to IRCC, can we ask them if they have any intention of introducing a similar program in next year? Because they introduced this program in April and they started they opened it up in May. So everyone has a very short time to prepare. So normally we know that, the parents grandparent program, sponsorship application will start in January. So if they have any intention of introducing this program, can they give up a little more heads up to the people so they can be more prepared and everyone is not running at the last minute, to meet all the requirements?
Yeah, we hear you, but this is, as far as we know, this is a one-off, although, one never knows with advocacy how far we can get, but message heard in terms of enough time and lead time.
Can I just ask back to the signature, clarify one more thing?
Go ahead.
With some of the, with work permit application that I assisted clients, the signature comes at the end when you're submitting. They allow you to sign online. I haven't done this application with clients, so I'm just wondering for you guys who did that, maybe that signature comes, at that part, if you have the experience.
I don't have any experience. I don't have clients who qualify, so.
Oh.
So back to the hours towards work experience. Kaylee says, usually in express entry, you can't count more than 30 hours a week for work experience. Is she right in saying that these streams, then this new pathway streams, are different?
Nothing in the eligibility criteria that they've listed saying there's a cap on how many hours you can include per week. It makes sense to me that if you try to include some very large number that they may think that you're maybe misrepresenting, but I haven't seen anything saying that there's a limit.
Okay, Evelyn has a clarification question. Refugee claimants, eligibility for the healthcare pathway. She was under the understanding that they qualify if their refugee claim was made prior to March 13th, 2020, even if there is a pending IRB hearing. or if a failed refugee claimant, you can qualify if you meet all of the other eligibility criteria.
So the language in the public policy is that refugee claimants cannot apply. That's what the language is. It doesn't say failed refugee claimants cannot apply, but it turns also back to Avvy's point about the fact that you have to have a legal immigration status to be able to apply. And most of the time, the clients I've seen who are failed refugee claimants won't have that status. So that then is the tricky way that creates the barrier.
I wonder, there might be refugee claimants who have status.
Yeah.
So
failed refugee claimants?
No, even refugee claimants. Like refugee claimants, they may have come to Canada on a visitor visa, and for some reason, but I guess a lot of them, by the time, they have passed the 12 months, they would not have been able to renew the visa. I don't know, I really don't know whether.
Yeah, and this is about because this is about the fact that refugee claimants cannot apply for these new pathways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there may be refugee claimants who have visitor visas, so who have legal status, but are also refugee claimants. But then they may not be able to meet the other criteria because they may not have been here long enough. I don't know.
You just totally confused me.
Because they have to have 12 months of work history, so.
Well, but for the new pathways, refugee claimants are not eligible.
I know, but it's.
So Evelyn is saying.
I'm just trying to find different ways of thinking. Some people, how these rules, they are written, they kind of just say, if this is A, then B. But then sometimes A can be B at the same time. You know what I mean? It's like people may, our status could be very fluid, right? So I think. But
the question is it true that if I'm a refugee claimant and I made my claim prior to March 2020 and I work in the healthcare field, I can claim?
No. So the bullet is this: you cannot be a refugee claimant in Canada. That's what it says. So it doesn't say anything about when you made your application. It doesn't say anything about failed refugee claimants. It says you cannot be a refugee claimant in Canada.
To access these pathways, yes.
Yeah, and that is coming right off of the eligibility criteria that IRCC is listing.
Yeah, but someone who is a refugee claimant might have a legal status, right?
As a visitor.
So, right? So that person may still be able to qualify because he meets those criteria. So I don't know if it means he has to give up his refugee claim, for instance. You know what I mean? So anyway, so I'm just kind of, I'm thinking
of a potential, right?
Yeah.
I think
I see, because you could be a visitor with legal status and apply as opposed to applying as a refugee claimant.
Correct. Yeah. But
then I think once you make a refugee claim, my understanding, and we'd have to check it, is that your visitor status is revoked. So I'm not sure actually if you can be a refugee claimant and a visitor at the same time.
Same time.
I do recall with students' visa, they were told when they made refugee claim, I do recall something about
they
lost their student visa. That's what I do recall. But anyway.
What if someone has submitted 2 applications under the same category because in first application they forgot to provide some documents, and then the second time they submitted the complete application because cap was not yet reached? Will both applications be looked at? Will they cancel out each other? I don't think we know the answer to those questions.
I mean, according to IRCC, if they submitted the first one with incomplete documents, they're supposed to send it back, right? As if it were never submitted. So
the second one would be the only one in the system.
That's according to what they're telling us.
Yeah.
That isn't always the reality of what happens.
That's true. How much does it, sorry, how much does it cost in
If I'm
total?
remembering correctly, the application fee is $550, but I'm just remembering that from my head. I can look it up while we're going ahead.
But it's not just the application fee, because you have to pay
Medical,
and you have to pay for the security and criminality. You have to pay for your language test if you
yeah.
have to one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everything does add up.
And also if you have a family, then, you know, and you want to include everybody in there, then it's going to be like $2,000-3,000.
And if you have to translate all your documents because you don't have them yet translated,
That's right.
everything.
Somebody had unmuted to say they had a question. Who was it?
It's me, Shahira.
Go ahead, Shahira.
There's a question like the international students, they already applied in a Canadian work experience class, and the same people they're applying for this new pathway to PR. How this will work, look at that, because this is what a lot of things I'm understanding how this gap is filled faster. Because I know somebody, they said they already applied through Canadian work experience class through Express Entry, then the same people they applied for the new pathway to PR, right? I mean, so how this is going to be worked?
I'm just thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. So there.
I don't think there is, like, I remember thinking about this not in this pathway, but on multiple applications for permanent residence. And Avvy, I don't know if you have had the same experience, but I do remember them allowing, like IRCC does allow for different applications in different pathways. So I don't think there's any bar in the law to making multiple applications.
It's not a problem.
So it depends on, like, you know, sometimes there are certain applications you can only, like refugee claims, for instance, like, you know, you can't make a refugee claim and do an H&C at the same time. But I don't know within these streams whether there's any requirement, whether there's any rule that says you must only apply for one stream. But wouldn't you be looking at your actual situation to pick the stream that you're most likely to succeed in? Like, wouldn't that be the?
I think the question is that someone already applied through CEC, so through the Canada Experience class, through Express Entry already, and now this new pathway opportunity came up, and they're wanting to submit through one of these streams now.
My general experience has been that on economic class applications, that you've been able to do multiple applications, and they just say you have to keep paying the different processing fees. So I think lots of people will hedge their bets and try both if they can qualify in both. I would. And nothing in the policy is saying that they won't allow it, right? But the problem with a lot of these temporary policies, like even my experience in the domestic violence one, was they create a temporary policy that's a little bit vague, and then they deny cases on criteria that they never listed, right? And then it becomes clearer as they make decisions what they are really looking for. So the presentation we're giving you is kind of based on what they're saying right now. But we don't know really if officers will say, well, you already have one in this stream. Well, we're not going to process this one. It's hard to say.
Yeah, so my question is, because they're paying the fee for both the place, right? If in case you mentioned that before, even the new pathway to PR, if they are missing some documents, they are sending the application, right? So they
That's
are
right.
also back, right?
That's correct.
So the receipt will come back too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a document. So maybe this is what I just thinking about this, the people who are Express Sundry, only those people have the application ready, everything ready, because they are taking a chance they don't want to lose the opportunity to, even in case for some reason, if they're not going to get the express entry, at least they're thinking that they will get.
That's right. Yeah. Hedging the debts. Yes.
Yes. In this case, they are losing the opportunities for the other people. That's what I think, that the gap is large already. I mean, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure how this one going to be further upcoming, whether there are going to be more spots available. Is there?
Well, we don't know. We don't know. As we said, the minister has been hearing a lot from, especially from international students and their supporters, that they need to increase the international students cap at least. There are others of us who are saying they need to lift all of the caps in spite of the slower uptake of the two essential workers streams. So we'll continue to push on that, especially as more and more people step forward to support migrant workers and other essential workers to complete their applications. What kind of proof of employment are they expecting in terms of documentation?
Best proof, like it's similar to like when we've supported people with the CEC class application, if they meet our criteria, is actually like pay stubs, evidence of tax returns if you filed them, all of the classic ways in proving that you've worked. And remember, when we're saying worked here, we're saying worked under the IRCC definition of work, right? So sort of cash payment, those things are probably not going to be looked at as work. Those are difficult things to prove that you've worked.
Yeah, self-employment disqualifies you, those kinds of things. Okay, thank you both. We're 3 minutes over the time. Thank you all for showing up and staying and asking your questions. We will post the recording on our YouTube channel, and you will receive a link to it. So it will have all of the questions that have been asked and answered. Naomi, before we go, you have a last comment or a question?
I just have a last question. I guess I'm asking Avvy and Shalini and any of the people online. Do you think that you are reaching the people that need to be reached about how to do this? Because it's complicated. Do you think that there needs to be more support for people or different kinds of support? I mean, I'm just thinking about, you know, an agricultural worker who may qualify but has no transportation to get the help that they need, or to get access to a computer, or maybe someone working as an essential worker, long hours, doesn't have the time to complete this. So I'm just wondering what suggestions anybody may have about what kind of additional support would be helpful and useful, either to you as providers of this information, or if we need more channels to support people, and what could they be?
Yeah, write your response in the chat. I think I'm getting a sense from folks who are nodding or answering that yes, more supports are needed, especially for migrant workers, Alois is saying, but more specifically, what kind of supports would be helpful? Shahira, you had another question. Is it about following up on what Naomi's asking?
There's another question, because based on my clients, the people who are applying for this new pathway to PR, they are in work permit, but their work permit is going to expire soon. Should they have to renew their work permit? Because when they apply, when they get it approved, they no need of, because maybe around.
Yes, yeah. Shalini is saying yes.
Okay, so that means you know that how long it takes the new pathway, how they know how long?
We have no idea how long.
No, right? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So once again, the question, what kinds of support will help you as frontline workers to support your clients? Are you finding it difficult to reach the people who need to know about these new pathways and opportunities, particularly essential workers, and for us, particularly migrant workers?
So I have two responses to this question, right? So one response is that if within our own agencies, there are in fact clients that we know who may qualify, then maybe we need to reach out to the clients to kind of say, hey, have you heard of this? Maybe it's something that you can apply. and see how we can support them in the application. I think the harder reach are the people who are not even clients of our agencies.
Yes.
So I think that probably would require kind of doing more outreach work. So like, for instance, in our case, we will have to do sort of like, using the, we have websites that, some of these clients visit a lot, so we may have to kind of put some, notices there and encourage people to contact us. And